My name's David Comito. I'm the host, and it's my pleasure to introduce Venerable, almost didn't come out of my mouth, Venerable Robina.
Well, you can call me some person who doesn't speak English calls me vulnerable. He says, "Dear
vulnerable. Are you vulnerable, Robina? You don't strike me as too vulnerable. I see the boot. Well, never mind. So anyhow, it's my pleasure to introduce Vulnerable Robina this evening, who will be doing the Karma workshop and public talk this evening. So you're spotlighted, and I'll try and keep track of what's going on here in the background. If there are any problems or questions, get in touch with me or Shankha. Otherwise, I'm going to shut up.
Okay, good, David. Happy to see you. Okay, people. Okay, so we'll just be easygoing tonight. It's like a public talk, so we could have some communists here. You never know. It's meant to attract everybody. So we'll just be very casual, and I'll sort of start. I'll do our motivation, but just do it in kind of our own words, So we're thinking we're going to be here for this 90 minutes. I'm going to go blah blah blah. You're going to be listening. I'm going to be listening. I promise. When I talk, I'm listening every time. We're going to talk about this fundamental kind of this fundamental worldview of the Buddha. That often is like some kind of, we think it's sort of made up by the hippies in the 1960s, but it's been around for a good 3,000 years, this worldview, we're only now, we modern European type people who track ourselves back to the Greeks, we're only now discovering that the wisdom of these amazing Indians, which is marvelous, which is marvelous. So we're going to be discussing a little bit this view, it's a worldview, it's a view of the world, okay? And why are we listening to it? Think about it out of curiosity. Maybe we think there might be some tools we can take from it, because think of it as advice. We don't have to take the advice. I mean, Buddha's not shoving it down our throats. I'm going to be talking about what Buddha has found to be true, but from his own observation. And anybody since him who's followed his methodology has found also to be true. So the reason to listen, like I said, is to take some tools from it. Even if it's 1% of what we hear, we find useful in our lives. It's the bottom line. If it's just going to be living in the head, which is how we think of philosophy in the modern world, which is pretty shocking, pretty weird, actually. It's just wasting time. Fill your head with rubbish, but if you can trickle it from down to the heart to your life, then it's worthwhile. So we think like that. And then why are we even going to do that? Listen, to get some tools so we can use it to help us become a better, more wise, more marvelous person, That's the bottom line. And then, of course, we're more connected to others so we can be useful to the world. How marvelous. Okay, so the fundamental, the crucial piece about this worldview of karma that makes it fundamentally different as a view of the universe from both the creator religious points of view, the creator philosophical views, and the materialist philosophical views. I mean, the materialists, they share at least one thing in common. And this is where Buddha fundamentally differs, and it's fundamentally different. The implication is different. The assumptions about it are different. The approach to it brings a very different, result in oneself. The view we have, if we're Muslim, Christian, whatever, is, and in many other religions too, maybe they're not so well known in the world, we always track everything back to this fundamental source, like the first moment, the first cause. Even among the Christians, they make capital letters, capital F, capital C. The first cause, called God, as among the Christians, called Allah among the Muslims, God among the Jews probably. I mean, and that's the term the Hindus use. The Hindus even have a view of karma, but they still track everything back to a source, a fundamental first source, a source. Buddha not. It's the biggest difference. Now that we're putting it more bluntly, if I'm a Christian, I believe I'm made by God, created by God. God gives me the soul. If I'm a materialist, well, instead of God, it's the parents, isn't it? They made me, quite literally. So in each of those cases, the view we have, which we take for granted as a normal truth, is that we come from somewhere else. We're created by somebody. Well, for the Buddha, this is the wackiest idea he's ever heard. I mean, of course, he doesn't talk like that, but I'm expressing it. The Buddhist view is so fundamentally different, but we often mightn't listen. We often mightn't join the dots, because what we do when we hear karma, we hear it in exactly the same way, which of course is punishment and reward. There's a boss out there. Mummy's the boss. God's the boss. You do this. Why? Because I said so. And that's not a joke. That's actually the Christian teaching. I asked my Jesuit priest friend, the kind of the gelugpas of the Christians, this Jesuit priest friend. I said, by definition, what is a sin? What does it mean, a bad action? What does it mean? And he said, by definition, A sin is doing what God said not to do. In other words, and that completely makes sense. My mummy runs the household. She is the boss, you know. Okay, it's not as primordial as God, but the principle is the same. You do this, she will tell me. Being a smarty pants, I'll say why. And you should ask. And we know her answer, because I said so. Well, that's the Christian teaching, that by definition, what makes an action virtuous, which brings good results, which is reward, it implies a creator, doesn't it? Reward implies a rewarder, and punishment implies a punisher. Now, that's how we hear karma. We just plonk this dualistic view of punishment and reward, which implies a punisher and a rewarder, onto the Buddhist view. Completely a mistake. There are Buddha's rules. There are some rules in Buddhism that come from Buddha, like conventional things, not natural negativities, as they call it. As far as Buddha's concerned, you know, it's a natural law. The natural law is a very powerful concept. We talk about God's law, and then there's natural law. It's okay, of course, the materialists only talk about natural law. Well, guess what? So does Buddha. Exactly the same. There's no concept in Buddha of a creator. There's no concept, therefore, of a rewarder or a punisher, therefore, of reward and punishment. And we've got to analyze this. We just assume. And why do we assume this? Don't blame your Jewish mummy and your Catholic mummy for telling you, making you feel guilty. This view, this dualistic view of, you know, an external source that makes you, or even the view of some internal source, like the essence of you is called a soul, Buddha argues with that too. We don't need this boss, you know, we don't need a person to run the show. It's like a conspiracy theory. We don't need it. You know, the law of karma, it's not complicated, but we just can't hear it properly. The law of karma for the Buddha, which is what he has observed this. He is not a creator. It is not revelation. It is not coming from on high. He did not have a vision of it. It wasn't revealed to him. He didn't make it up. He didn't have a dream about it, which is how we think of spiritual. We're so insulting, you know. It is his own observation with his own noggin. The difference is their noggin, their head is more subtle than the mere brain. The mind in Buddhism, this is coming from these amazing Indians, you know, more than 3,000 years ago. I always quote this. I remember His Holiness saying, it was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. Buddha came out of that tradition, you know, and he diverged in his own direction, specifically in relation to that point. And that, of course, is his view about emptiness, his view about how things exist, his non-dualistic view. There's no creator. We don't need creating. There's no such thing. And of course, in the Buddhist teachings, extensive, deep philosophical discussions and debates on this point that, frankly, is just not viable. It's not possible for the Buddha that you can come from someone else. Or the idea, I mean, this sounds hilarious if we're neuroscientists and if we are materialists, and most of us in this world, even if we're religious, we completely buy into, and I'm not being insulting, the materialist view of the universe, the materialist view of where you come from. Our psychiatrists, our psychologists, our neuroscientists track it back to your parents. And then you track your parents back to mum, to the grandma, grandpa, and then back to the monkeys. We track it back through the physical, don't we? So, of course, yes, mummy and daddy do give us a brain. They do give us genes and DNA. They absolutely do this, but they do not give us a mind. And so the whole thing rests on the Buddha's analysis of what the mind is. Mind for the Buddha is not physical by definition. It is not physical. It's not called a soul. The Christians talk about a non-physical thing called a soul. No such thing for the Buddha. We have a mind. It refers to the grosser level, our conceptuality, our intelligence, our love, our hate, our psychosis, our subtler level, our emotions, feelings, unconscious, subconscious, the entire spectrum of our inner being. This is what is referred to by mind or consciousness in Buddhism. These are synonymous virtually. And the second point, we've got much subtler levels of mind, much subtler levels of cognition. The job of the mind is cognize. And so, of course, the grosser level of mind, the sensory and the grosser levels of our conceptuality, of course, they depend upon a decent working brain. So without insulting neuroscientists, you can say the brain is a physical indicator of what's going on in the mind. That's not trying to be rude to people. So your consciousness is word is much more subjective, much more experiential, the way Buddha uses it, you know, that what your mind is, your thoughts and feelings and emotions, unconscious, subconscious. So, of course, the question is, where does it all come from? We always want to know, where did it begin? Even we say, where did it begin? Well, it's a more kind of cause and effect. This is the concept of karma now. Because the law of karma for the Buddha is this natural law that he has identified with his own observation, Clearly, powers of observation at a subtler, more profound level than we would posit with our mind level, the level of the brain cognition, you know, it's a much subtler level. And that's what these Indians discovered more than 3,000 years ago. They're the ones who cultivated this amazing view, this technique called single point of concentration, which enables you to access these subtler levels of mind that Buddha asserts. That consciousness, think of it as like they use the term mental continuum. This moment of consciousness comes from the previous moment of consciousness. The main cause of the anger in my mind is the previous moment of anger. The main cause of love in my mind is the previous moment of love. This is getting to the concept of the law of cause and effect. The law of cause and effect is the law of karma. I mean, I've heard it means action. I don't speak Sanskrit. But it's this fundamental law such that every living being is run by it, or every living being's mind runs within this law. Like every garden you see, everything that grows, it's been articulated by clever gardeners, clever botanists, and they can articulate the law that they've seen with their eyes. They didn't make up botany and plonk it on gardens. They've observed the workings of gardens and articulated it. That's the Buddha. He's observed the workings of minds and lives and beings and articulated the law that runs it all. So specifically in relation to happiness and suffering. So this law just is what runs the mind. It's the law that runs the universe, basically. It's the law within which the universe runs, put it this way. Like I said, not made up, it's been observed. And indeed, as the Dalai Lama says, if you can follow Buddha's methodology and you can prove he's wrong, well, of course, you reject Buddha, you must, you know. Just believe him. Eventually we can prove it to be true as well when we follow the steps that he followed. So anyway, this law is this natural law of cause and effect, such that every millisecond of what any mind does, and the term in Tibetan is very interesting for a sentient being. I think this is a much better translation. We should use this more directly. I think it's marvelous. The Tibetan word is sem chen, mind possessor. It's so delicious. Sentient being is too vague, you know. A mind possessor is wonderful. Well, the Buddha says there are trillions of mind possessors. Not just humans, we're like a tiny percentage of all the mind possessors. All the other ones, we can see the bugs and the rats and the ants and the beings living in our body and the tiniest little bugs possible, and the kangaroos and the birds, and then all many other beings, mind possessors, that we can't necessarily see, that are, you know, but absolutely out of existing as far as the Buddhist view is concerned. Countless beings, enormously, all the way from the spectrum of enormous joy and happiness to the most intense suffering. So Buddha's observing that every living being is driven by the wish to be happy and not suffer. I mean, it sounds kind of boring almost, but you know, this is his way of saying. And so his law of karma is articulated in terms of what causes happiness and what causes suffering. So of course we spend our lives, look at us, we spend our lives trying to do this. We spend our lives trying to be happy, which means we're trying to find the causes of happiness. And we spend our lives trying to avoid suffering, which means we're trying to find the causes of suffering. So the view we tend to have, which is the philosophical view called the samsarist view, is the view of samsara, the view we all accept, and the view in many levels that is the view of the materialist philosophical view of the universe, is happiness and suffering come from out there. Out there. Out there. There's happiness and there's suffering out there. So we spend our lives searching for the things and events and people and sounds and smells and tastes, etc., such that when we have contact with them, will trigger happy feelings. This is literally the process. And then we avoid the things and events, or we try best to avoid the things, people, events, tastes, smells, etc., that such that contact with them triggers an unpleasant feeling. This is it. And there's a deep analysis of this in the Buddhist view, you know, in the Buddhist understanding of the mind and of how karma plays out. So there's the Buddhist view of the mind then is not physical. And as His Holiness the Dalai Lama said, it's easy to talk about the mind. I mean, you studied in depth in the monastic university system, which is the basis of what we study in our centers. We study the epistemological model of the mind and then the psychological model. It's fascinating detail. It's utterly fascinating, these views about how the mind functions and what it is. So, of course, it's easy to talk about all that, but as His Holiness said, if it's not physical, oh my goodness, it's really advanced to have a direct experience of your mind. That is what's possible, but at least we can start with the theories, you know. So this mind of ours, every millisecond without exception, every millisecond, what it's doing is and then on the basis of what the mind, on the basis of what the body and speech do, on the basis of what the mind does, all of this process is the process of quote unquote creating karma, doing actions. And then they use the analogy of seeds and fruits. Every millisecond of what we think and do and say sows seeds in our mind. it programs our mind. It's the best way. Buddha would like that concept. Programs our mind necessarily every millisecond, whether you know it or not. It's like botany. You don't need to know botany for botany to work. Botany doesn't go to sleep until you learn it. I promise. Botany just happens. All the various conditions come together, and so things grow. So then the law of karma is the same. So what Buddha's done is articulate this law, and he says, hey guys, if you want to learn to be happy and learn not to suffer, bare minimum, all the way to the happiness of enlightenment, you better learn these laws, because this is what runs your life, babe. You better be in charge of them. And they say one of the worst sufferings of most beings, from the Buddhist point of view, is that we don't realize that we are the cause of our own happiness and home suffering. This is the fundamental point in the Buddhist view. Fundamental. And the greatest pain comes from this, like, and Lama Yeshe would often use this word, so don't be insulted, this almost like the dualistic but schizophrenic view. It's out there somewhere. We're all frantically looking for what causes the suffering, and then blaming, and frantically trying to get what's happiness and blaming that too. You blame the chocolate cake for making you happy. You blame the boyfriend for making you suffer. This demented view that we have. The reason the bodhisattvas have such compassion for us, because we haven't got a clue about this law of cause and effect. We don't realize that what our mind does and what our body does and what our speech does, they're the actors in this playing out of karma, the sowing of the seeds in our mind that then ripen necessarily in the future. That's what seeds do, as our happiness and our suffering. So it's a pretty intense concept. Don't need a creator to run the show. Don't need a person to punish and reward. It's a natural law. You don't need a botanist to announce it's a cauliflower. It is a cauliflower already. It's just helpful to know it, that's all. So it's a very dualistic view, this concept of punishment and reward, not like that, not like that, not in Buddhism. So it's, in that sense, fundamentally different. It takes a while to kind of internalize that and to live according to it. So, of course, you can't prove it first. You can't prove anything first. You can't even prove that 1 + 1 is 2 is first. You've got to believe somebody first. That was why, okay, we don't choose our teachers at school when we're 5 years old. Mummy sends us to school, but we've assumed she's, checked on the quality of the teacher, and the teacher knows a bit about math. So then we listen to what she says, and we listen to it. We believe it. And then we go home and she says, prove it to yourself. You do your homework. Well, that's the Buddha. So you got to check up on the Buddha. He might be some peanut. You don't know. You got to check his qualities, check on his reputation, check on the other practitioners, check on people now. And if you like what you see, they're the proof of the pudding, isn't it? Then you take it as your working hypothesis. It's the only way to say it. It's the only way I ever say it. I never say I believe in karma. We get superstitious if we say that, We just kind of swallow it whole. That's just ignorance. You don't just swallow it whole that 1 + 1 is 2. You learn it. You prove it for yourself. That's what Buddha's saying, the whole point. He says this is the law that runs the universe. That's it. Don't need a creator. He's not being rude. It's not as if there was a creator and they chucked them out and they lost their job. No. There's no such thing as a creator. It's a misconception. But he doesn't, this interesting point, he doesn't argue, he doesn't disagree with the word superior being. Actually, it's very interesting. In Melbourne years ago, I'm from Melbourne in Australia, and the Catholic University, they asked me to give a talk at some conference. I had a 20-minute slot. I've mentioned this before. And I remember the morning I arrived to give the talk, I had no idea what I was going to talk about. I couldn't think of what to talk about for this 20-minute slot. So then I looked up the dictionary, the Merriam-Webster dictionary for the definition of God. And it said 3 qualities: infinite compassion, infinite wisdom, infinite power. I thought, well, that's interesting. They're the same qualities of a Buddha. Same. So it seems to me over the centuries, this is my own personal observation, in all the cultures of the world, humans have worked so hard, to come up with the meaning of life. How dare we criticize any of them? There might be wacky ideas, but you've got to honor the people. You've got to look at the Australian Aboriginals' views are so bizarre, so abstract. If you compare with the Western materialist views, I can't understand them, 40,000 years they were happily moving along until these white English people popped in and took over. But they've got these unusual views of the universe. There's so many views all over the planet where humans are. How amazing. So, it seems to me that many of these humans have come up with similar findings, different interpretations. That's a fact. So the Christians and the Buddhists, let's say, the Christians come up with this concept of all-powerful, all-compassionate, all-knowing energy that pervades the universe. Well, tick the box, babe. That's what Buddha says. The Mahayana view, exactly the same. The difference is Buddhism does not give the job of a creator to that energy. Buddha says you can all become one. Of course, that's the worst sin of pride possible in Christianity. You've got to track yourself back to the first source, which is God. But the Buddha discusses or argues with all this with the Hindus. He didn't know the Christian views and they didn't exist, but they're the similar view. The Jewish views, the Christian views, the Muslim views, similar view in the concept of a creator, you know. At a philosophical level, Buddha disagrees with this. So the implication of that here then is that, you know, we, as His Holiness said one time, we are our own creators. It's self-creation. And it's not too complicated. I mean, in our own life, we know this. You know very well that that you create the musician you become. You don't say, why are you a good musician, Robina? Well, you know, the Steinway piano was so brilliant, I just became a good musician. Rubbish. You thank your teacher, you thank Bach for writing the music, but honey, you know you did the work, you're the boss, you turned into a musician and you worked hard, so you own that. You know what, when it comes to happiness and suffering, we've got a completely weird other set of rules. It's everybody else's fault. Why are you good at music, Robina? Oh, it's Bach's fault. It's, you know, it's my teacher's fault. I'm just an innocent victim. They forced music into me. Nobody talks like that. But look at us when it comes to happiness and suffering and problems where this innocent victim, this is how we feel. We feel, I didn't ask to get born, not my fault. And look at the instinct that arises when we're blamed, when bad things happen. The first instinct is primordial, is to avoid, is deny, is to blame, is to put it out there. Or sometimes if we're neurotic, we turn it in and we blame ourselves and we become guilty. They're both neurotic views. They're not valid, Buddha says. So the implication of karma is so delicious that we can get to see it, you know. Because if I created me, if I came into this life program, because your consciousness didn't begin in the time of conception. If you're a Christian, your consciousness began there. Well, your soul began there. Mummy and Daddy give you the egg and sperm, but the soul was put there by God. I'm not being rude. The Jews say it goes in later. They say it a few months later, God puts the soul there. This is why they have a different view about abortion, I think, you know, because you're not killing a person until the soul is there, it's not a person. But the Christians say the soul starts at the time of conception. And of course, the materialist view is there's only the egg and sperm, isn't it? And Mummy and Daddy are the boss. They're the creator. They made you. But for the Buddha. So the Buddha's view is your consciousness is not a function of the brain, is not physical. Exists independent upon the physical, no argument. Thanks, Mum and Dad, for working hard, giving me the egg and the sperm that my consciousness can conjoin with. There's no role of a creator at all. There's no concept like that in Buddhism. But you don't come from a creator. You don't come from Mummy and Daddy. Your body does, yeah, but your mind not. So, and you don't start at conception, because your consciousness is a separate entity. It's intimately connected to the material. The Vajrayana teachings are very delicious about this, you know. So your consciousness doesn't start then. So if from this moment you track yourself back like second by second, your body your body tracked it back to the first second of conception. If you keep going back, you'll get back there, won't you? And then the second before conception, you know, the egg was in Mummy's body, the sperm was in Daddy's body, no problem. But what about your mind? This continuity of mental moments, this river of mental moments, this unbroken chain of mental moments, this mental continuum, this thoughts and feelings and emotions of love or hate and jealousy and compassion, whatever's in it. A continuity that goes back to the second before, an unbroken chain of mental moments. You get back to the first second of conception. Well, what about the second before conception? Well, guess what? That tracks itself back to a previous moment of this very consciousness, And a few weeks before that, it was in a previous body, and a few lives before, in a previous life before that, and before that. And of course, the big question we have is, but when did it begin? We always want the first moment. We always want to know the first moment. As His Holiness said with all these scientists one time, he has these marvelous discussions. He said, Big Bang? No problem. Just not the first Big Bang, that's all. Because even the universe for the Buddha is also beginningless. This is the nuttiest idea we've ever heard. We want to get back to some first moment. So we want to get back to some person who's called first cause, who's called God. And of course, if you're a naughty child at school, you know the worst question to ask is, well, where did God come from? You don't ask that question. We know that. But it's a correct question. It's a valid question. Well, the Buddha's view is a Buddha now is a being who's got all power, all knowing, all compassion, all wise, all pervasive. That's the goal of a Buddhist, to become a Buddha. That's a superior being. What's the content? Where did that come from? Previous moments of that consciousness. It's a very simple concept of continuity. Previous moments, cause and effect. This moment comes from the previous, which comes from the previous, which comes from the previous. And then, as His Holiness says, for the universe, Big Bang, no problem. Just not the first Big Bang. But it's a shocking view for us because we assume there has to be some first big moment. We assume that. That assumption, Buddha argues with. He says it's a misconception. It's coming from this deeply ingrained misconceptions in the bones of our being, you know, which he argues with. So the concept of karma, law of cause and effect. Every millisecond of what I think and do and say, one, sows seeds or programs my mind that will produce my future suffering or my future happiness, bottom line. And the 4 ways it will ripen as a type of rebirth, as a tendency to keep doing that action, as an experience of having that action done to you, and even as an environmental result. 4 ways karma ripens. And every moment I experience now, the environmental result, experiences at the hands of others, my own tendencies and my own humanity, they're the fruit of my past actions. So we are the boss. So it's a law we must learn. If you want to have a garden, you've got to learn botany. If you want to have a cake, you've got to learn cooking. You can ask someone else, it's fine. But you best to learn it yourself. You won't get happiness by getting someone else to do it for you. It's not possible. You're the boss. You're the cook. You're the creator. You're the gardener. You're the creator of yourself. So it's a delicious view, really, if we hear it like this. I think it's the best, lovely view. I love it. Obviously, I like it. Because it's empowering. It's empowering. I mean, if your mummy and daddy are blame, I know it sounds hilarious when I talk like this, but please forgive me. If it is actually true, if we can prove Buddha to be wrong, and it is actually true that my mother and father, yes, they gave me a brain, I do not argue, but they didn't give you a mind. Keep remembering these words are separate for Buddha. They didn't give me love and hate and psychosis and jealousy and compassion, or being good at music or football or whatever else it is. My tendencies, these are my own tendencies that come from my habit of having done them before. My mother was a musician. She taught her little Bobsy music. So we would say, oh, Robina got her music from her mummy. No, she didn't. My mummy was good at music because she'd done something like that before. I was good at music because I'd done something like that before, and I conveniently got born to my mummy who nurtured and nourished my music. That's the way to put it in the karmic view, you know. Of course, it takes time to think, because it's not how we think in our modern world. It's not the way neuroscientists think. It's not the way the materialist world thinks. It's not the way psychologists and psychiatrists think. It's a very different view. So it takes time to process it, to put it all together, not to see the contradictions, you know. But the essence of it is we are the boss. I think that's great. I love being the boss. And it brings accountability. And if we really live according to it, if I know that I'm experiencing all the happiness and suffering of mine from the actions I've done in the past, and I really want, I look at the garden and I see these beautiful flowers and these ugly weeds, and now it's my garden. I want to know the law. I want to know how to control this garden, please. It's pretty obvious. And the law of karma also refers to all the flowers, but this is something that's really powerful. We only talk about the weeds. We all only ever ask, why do bad things happen? I've never yet in all my years as a Buddhist ever had one person ever ask, Robina, why do good things happen? And there's a reason for that. We'll go into that in the weekend, you know. It's more, the logic of attachment and aversion is why that is so. So this is the general principle about karma. Whatever we are, the humanity that we have, the dog that's a dog, the ant that's an ant, that's due to their past actions. Then the tendencies in our mind, they're due to our past actions, our past habits. How we're seen and treated by others, that's due to our past actions. And even the way the physical world impacts upon us, that's due to our past actions. So we are literally the creator. So even learning these 4 ways that karma ripens is very, it really helps us put together and understand and how to apply this law of karma, you know, so we can start to be in charge of it. Because the bottom line is we don't want suffering and we do want happiness. And of course, with Buddha's teachings in the 4 Noble Truths, he goes to much more subtle level of teachings. In the first Noble Truth, it's the first teaching he gave, you know, in Varanasi, out of Varanasi, after he became enlightened. The first of these 4 facts for the noble ones is that there is suffering. And he describes 3 levels, different ways of presenting, but there's 3 levels of suffering. The first kind is what we all agree is suffering. It's called the suffering of suffering, or Lama Zopa calls the suffering of pain. Basically, it's when the bad things happen. And everybody doesn't want those. Automatically, primordially, instinctively. Nobody wants that, whether you're the monkey, the ant, or the human. That's the suffering of suffering. Then the second one is the suffering of change, which is much more subtle. We're not going to discuss that tonight. But that's another whole level of subtlety of suffering. And then even there's a more subtle level. So, so if you know you don't want weeds in your garden, you better learn to know the law that runs gardens. It's pretty obvious. And you know you want the veggies and the flowers, you'd better learn to know, not just sit there and go, oh, aren't I lucky? Look at all the veggies. Lucky is a hideous word. Lucky shows there's no law. It's just like it's just like, it's just like random. And that's how we think of life. We think suffering and happiness are random. We don't think there's any law. And why we don't think so, it's very interesting, let's look at this. Because we have another set of rules that we think are what are the causes of happiness and suffering, and we try them all the time, but they don't work. And that's where Buddha's point is. He argues with the methods we use now. Like I said before, the fundamental view we all have, which is the view of samsara, the samsaric philosophical view, is the view of the innocent victim. You didn't ask to get born. God made you. Mummy made you. They didn't consult you, I promise. Think about this. It's kind of fascinating. I was going to say before, and I'll say it now. It sounds hilarious, but I mean it sincerely. If you can actually prove that Buddha's wrong, let's say, and karma's a load of rubbish, your consciousness is a load of rubbish, and it is the brain, and that you are made by mummy and daddy, and that God is rubbish as well, let's say all of that. Let's say we prove it to be true. Materialists haven't proven that God is not true. They just don't like it. I mean, they're so arrogant. They just don't like the idea of God. They don't like the idea of karma. So they say that, but they haven't proven it. Never mind, that's another discussion. But if you can prove, let's say God, the Christians are wrong and the Buddhists are wrong. Let's say we've proven that it is true that your mother and father make you, give you, and I mean by that, yes, they give you a brain, I don't argue, but they give you depression, they give you anger, they give you psychosis, they give you, like Mother Teresa's mother gave Mother Teresa her sainthood, that Hitler's mummy gave him his monstrosities, If we can prove that to be true, then I agree. Your mother is the blame. I agree. And look, psychologists think that. Everybody instinctively thinks their mum's the blame, not even their dad, their mum. So man, poor mum gets the blame, isn't it? And if that's true, then you should blame your mother. Don't believe your therapist when she tries to get you to stop blaming your mother. I agree, and I'm really not being sarcastic here. Think through logically what I'm saying. If it is really true that your mother actually didn't make you, which is the materialist view, then I'm sorry, it's consistent and coherent to then blame her. Okay, you can afford to forgive her if you like for making a mistake and making a crummy person. But in the end, she is to blame. I agree with you. I totally agree with you. So you should blame her. I agree, because she did make you. It's like Frankenstein and his monster. You can't blame the poor monster. It's like Toyota, Mr. Toyota and the car. You can't blame the car. It's the handiwork of Mr. Toyota. Well, we are the handiwork of our parents. That's what we think. Okay, I dare not go to the question, maybe you should blame God too. Italians blame God. They get upset when I tell them this, but they do. They've got these terrible sayings about God. God is a pig, I heard. Lama Yeshe in the 1970s, when he went to visit his friend Geshe Jampa Gyatso, who was the teacher there of the master's program in, maybe they hadn't begun it then, at our center in Italy. And Lama was in the ward at the hospital visiting him, the Geshe. He was sick. And the Italian boys were translating to Lama all the rude things that the men were saying about God. He was shocked that people talked about their creator like that, We were Catholics in Melbourne. We must have been Irish Catholics. I don't know. I think not Irish. No, we weren't Irish. What were we? Can't remember. Whatever we were, French or something. But we didn't ever criticize God. You'd never do that, But some people do. And then one Argentinian told me they're even worse than the Italians. Anyway, we don't like to blame God, but it's sort of logical. I mean, you think about it. I find it so fascinating. The Buddha says they didn't make you, baby. They just gave you egg and sperm. They gave you a body. Aren't they kind? You brought the rest with you, honey. Hitler made himself. Mother Teresa made herself. We make ourselves. So we better learn this law so we can be in charge of it. That's the essence, And that's the overview I'd like to present to you. It has 34 minutes I've been talking. So now you have to ask me some questions. Come on. This is a general presentation of karma. We can go into details, but I need you to ask me some questions now, if you'd like to. About what I've talked about already.
Yes, Venerable Robina, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, this is Deborah, and I just wanted to ask you, I can't speak about it, but I have heard before that there's so many similarities between Buddha and Jesus.
I'm sure there are. So what's your question? I'm sure there are, of course. They're both holy beings. But what's the question? Yes, Deborah.
Well, as I was hearing you, you were differentiating, and so like, for example, I've heard it from Thich Nhat Hanh. He says he has the Buddha and Jesus together because they're so similar.
Right. Absolutely. Listen, yeah, of course. But I mean, in order to talk about karma, Deborah, I have to talk about the differences, don't I? Wouldn't you agree? If I'm going to talk about a particular law that is unique to Buddhism and we want to understand it, we have to understand what it's not. It's not criticizing Christianity. I love my Catholic upbringing. I'm just looking at different. I know I sound rude every time I talk, but I'm not criticizing it. But from another perspective, you can sit there and speak for 17 hours on the similarities between Jesus and Buddha. And that exactly is what Thich Nhat Hanh decided to do, to bring people together. That's all the Dalai Lama ever does, is bring people together. So there's a different discussion at different times, according to the topic. The topic here is to learn about the Buddhist view of karma. So we have to know the differences. It's not meant to be an aggressive or blaming one. It's just simply pointing out the differences. Can you see my point, Deborah?
Yes.
Because if you want to follow the law of karma, you've got to know what it means. You can't just pretend, oh, it's just like Jesus. It's not. It's fundamentally different in many ways, even with cause and effect. You sow what you reap, the Christians say. Of course, there are so many similarities. Of course there are, Deborah. It's absolutely a given. But I'm discussing very specifically the specific points about karma that are fundamentally different from the Christian view, the Muslim view, the materialist view, in order for us to understand it. Do you get my point, Deborah? It's not meant to be sectarian.
Yes, I do.
I just talk. I know my way of talking is very rough. Can be kind of make people a bit nervous, and maybe that's what is coming across to you. Maybe you've heard me before, haven't you, Deborah? You know I'm not that rude all the time.
No, you've helped me a lot.
Good, I'm happy, Deborah. But in the end, Deborah, you see, the whole point is with all of this stuff, if we can be educated about the Christian teachings and educated about this ones, then we can slowly find our own path, and then we can commit to it seriously, can't we?
Yes.
That's the main thing. I mean, so it's good to discuss all these things. I mean, in the monastic university system, and way back in India at the time, in this amazing monastery that's famous, that is the sort of the source of our Tibetan Buddhist monastic system, which is the system of the Nalanda monastery, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th century in India. That the debate of all the different views, of course, the prevailing views at that time, I don't know if they had many Christians. Maybe some Christians came along, traveled to India and joined this monastery and studied the philosophical views, because they were very serious practitioners at that time, and people were very tolerant of different philosophical views. And they even had, in order to get into the monastery, where you could study all these different views, all the different Indian views, all the different, so it was India, so obviously the Indian philosophical views, all of which are very different. And in order to get into the monastery, you had to debate, you had to debate with the doorkeeper. They were all scholars. So you really had to be serious in your knowledge about all these things. Whereas for us in our culture, we're so sectarian, we're so neurotic, we're so protective of our own views. We can't even hear somebody else's views without it sounding like it's attacking, So it's really important to know the differences. But at another time, just like Thich Nhat Hanh, His Holiness will give a general talk to people, and there'll be Christians there. All he will do is talk about the similarities. So it's a question of context and time,
Yes.
You get my point,
yes.
Deborah?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much, darling. Thank you. It's a good point. Thank you so much. What else, people?
Venerable Robina, I had a question. This is Kevin.
Hello, Kevin. Yes.
Listening to you talk about tracing back consciousness before the physical, how do we parse that out as separate from the notion of a soul? It seems
I understand your point. No, it's a good point. But first of all, the main difference, Kevin, is in the main difference between a soul and consciousness. Well, okay, the main difference between a soul that comes from before and continues after, and a consciousness that comes from before and continues after, essentially there's no difference from that point of view. But from the point of view of the source of that soul and the source of the consciousness, that's a massive difference, isn't it? The Christians say your soul tracks itself back to God. The Hindus say that. But the Buddhists would say your consciousness tracks itself back to itself and can never track itself to anything else. So that's a really major difference, isn't it? Are you seeing my point here?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. And the other point is, of course, when we start to look into the difference where Buddha diverged from all these amazing Hindu views of these genius Indians, Buddha was educated in that system, went as far as he could go. And where he differed, where he diverged, was very specifically in relation to his own direct experiential findings about the nature of self. Atman, they called it, which is the equivalent of a soul. So Buddha also talks about itself, but it's the way, so the difference between the consciousness, consciousness is one thing, but the other one is the discussion about self, and that's where Buddha diverged. So the self in Buddhism isn't a separate component. It's not in the world we talk about a body, a mind, and a soul. Buddha's talking only about a body and a mind, only about a body and a consciousness. So as far as this term self is concerned, Buddha's explanation of what a self is, which is where he diverged from the Hindus, that it's not a separate, findable, pointable thing. It's really just the name we give to this combination of body and mind. He's got these much more subtle views about what the self is, But basically the Buddha's view, again, when it comes to the soul, there's two different things, which is the equivalent of self in the Hindus. It comes from a source originally, but for the Buddha, your consciousness can never come from anything else but previous moments of itself. But it continues like a soul does. And in many ways, the Christian teaching of heaven and hell is similar to the Buddhist view. But again, the major difference is the role of God. God is the one who decides. There's no view like that in Buddhism either. Our own actions decide their own results. So there's some of the differences. You see my point?
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Kevin. Thank you very much.
You have a question from Beth, who asks, what is the karmic connection of having a twin?
Thank you very much. Okay, good. Let's go into a bit more detail then. We'll do more in the weekend, of course. But the thing is, we've got we can see, can't we, that we're very social beings. And this is one of the ways our karma ripens, our past actions. We do things in relation to others. We're intensely social. We've got a mother, so we start already being born in another mother's body. I mean, that's so intense, you can't believe it. You have a father who provides the sperm. You then meet people from the time you're little. You come out of the womb, you've got grandmas and sisters and aunties and uncles and rats and dogs and cats. And then you have next door neighbors. And then you get more broadly in the world, you've got friends and enemies and strangers. So we're very interconnected with each other. And the way we interact, the way we do actions is in relation to each other. So from that point of view, we create intensely strong history with each other. So, the mother you get born to, that's not just some random event. The mother, the baby, that once the person dies, the karmic seed that determines the mother they're going to get born to, that's already triggered before they even die. And when they leave the body, and then the mummy and daddy a few weeks later hop into bed, that consciousness will run like a magnet to that particular specific mummy and daddy. It's not random. It's not possible. And the intensity, you can see it, the intensity of relationships between children and parents is, some parents can't stand their children because there's a karmic connection there, but mainly as enemies. And so the mothers abuse their children, fathers abuse their children because there's an enemy connection. But they get born to that mother. Other mothers are divine and adore their children and treat them beautifully. So got very strong karmic connection with the woman's womb, the woman and the daddy, if he's around, that provide the egg and the sperm, that provide your body. Now also, you've got very strong karmic connection. It's obvious. If two of you died from different places and you both run like a magnet to the same egg and sperm at the same time, my goodness, that's not a random event. That's intensely strong karmic connection. And you end up looking like each other, sounding like each other, because you've got so much similarity. So again, karma ripens as your tendencies, your personality traits. So the two twins, you've both been closely connected in a past life. Could have been as mother and child. It could have been as sister and brother. It could have been as lovers, a strong karmic connection. And then you both have the karma to be born a human. That's the first thing. Second, you both have tendencies. Our tendencies aren't coming from mummy and daddy. They're coming from our own past habits. They're basically habits. You get born programmed with your own habits. Well, it's clearly like with two twins that can often be, they've got so many similar tendencies, haven't they? So many similar tendencies, mentally and then even verbally. And not only that, because of the karma, they got similar bodies. That's due to the past actions, and their bodies are similar. And then also, they're treated very similar by other people. Many people can't even see the difference between them. So there's this. So then it's an intensely strong karmic history from the past, and then depending on the relationship. I mean, some people, some twins. I mean, look at the intense relationship between we so-called Siamese twins, conjoined twins. You've got such strong history with each other that you actually share a body. Some of them share hands, share sex organs. I mean, that is such an intense history, such an intense connection. And some people can't stand each other. Twins sometimes can look different. We have karma with anybody we meet. There's no way in the world anybody can harm you without you having harmed them. There's no way in the world anybody can be kind to you without you having been kind to them. Everything is like a natural law. There's nothing in karma that's random, which is the biggest shock of all, because we really believe most things that happen are random. And that's only because we don't know the law. If we knew the law, we'd see it was not random. So there's a strong karmic history between people, in other words. I mean, even siblings. There are 7 of us in our family. We all sound very similar, we've got similar personalities, very different in many ways, of course, but there are many similarities. I mean, strong history with each other from the past, I hope that answers, Beth. Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Andrew.
Hi. Going back to the idea of no source of a mind or a soul. Just
no first kind of big bang source. Yeah, no first cause.
Right. Just a curious question. With new minds, new souls, new people being born every day.
Yes.
How does one account for this expansion of being?
They come from other realms of existence. They come from the animal realm, from the spirit realm, from the hell realm, from the God realms. Buddha. We're all kind of cycling in all these. We're going from sort of like samsara consists of a bunch of suburbs. Some are very suffering, some are very happy, and due to our karma, we keep going from suburb to suburb. So animals become humans, humans become animals. There's never any more.
And do they switch? Like from human to animal to animal?
Absolutely. I mean, okay, let's just go one more level of detail, Andrew, about karma. The general first principle is that everything we think and do and say sows seeds, which brings fruits, which is our experiences in the future. The next level of detail is every action we do that's called negative, that's an action we do broadly, that the first level of negative actions will be one that harms another, which is an action we do with our body and speech, which is an action that's driven by anger or attachment or one of the neuroses. Do you understand? That's labeled a negative action. Well, that will program our mind with that kind of suffering. And that's the kind of, so we will in the future, we will, so if you spend your life killing and harming, that programs your mind with those tendencies. Well, necessarily for the Buddha, that will not give you a human body. Getting a human body is like winning the lottery. It's not really a lottery. It's like it's not illogical. It's not good luck, but it's so rare because to get a human body, the main cause has to be the habit of non-killing, of non-harming. So if we spend our human lives, and look at the human world, honey. I mean, look at the brutality of some humans. It's so tragic. They got born as a human due to past non-killing. There's millions of karmic seeds in our mind, but they haven't purified all their aspects of other actions as they get born with tendencies to be harmful, tendencies to rape, tendencies to lie, steal, kill. Look at the human realm. It's tragic. So that will not get them another human body, straight to a really suffering rebirth after that.
So it's not a linear trajectory.
No, not at all. No. It's qualitative. I mean, we can have the best life and completely tip it down the toilet and get the worst life after. So that's why we've got to learn the law, so you ensure that when you do die, you at least get another human body so you can keep on moving and practice a spiritual path. So eventually you can get out of the whole mess. The long-term goal, I haven't discussed that, but we can get out of the mess, Buddha says.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Andrew. What else, people? Anything else there, David? No other questions, you people? Okay, so as I said, the first level of detail about karma is that every millisecond, whatever any being thinks or does or says, necessarily whoever you are, monkeys, dogs, ants, fish, other beings we can't see, like I suggested, every second we are sowing seeds based on the tendencies in our mind. So we'll do certain things, think certain things, say certain things. So then we need to do so then the next level of detail is some of those are going to be negative, some of those are going to be positive, and some of those will be neutral. There's only 3 categories of types of actions. It's quite clear, it's quite, this negative and positive that makes us nervous. In modern psychology, we don't like it. It sounds punitive. It sounds judgmental. It sounds religious. But it's really fundamental. The character of a negative action for the Buddha, a non-virtuous one, is one that we do with our body and speech, let's say, as a human, that's driven by, you know, one of the ego-based neuroses. I mean, Buddha describes the mind. We're going to go into this in the weekend more. He divides all the thousands and thousands of thoughts in our mind into three categories. Those that are negative, neurotic, deluded, misconceptions, voices of ego based in fear that cause us enormous pain and suffering, but also that cause us to use our body and speech to harm others. Because, you know, so that's what negative actions are, done out of our own neuroses, and we use our body and speech, the servants of our mind, to lie, steal, kill, cheat, whatever, you know, whatever the world does. Have a look at the world. Then there are actions that we do that are labeled virtuous, and there's a second category of states of mind called virtuous states of mind. And these are like love, compassion, intelligence, kindness. You know, we know these. These are our saving grace. And there's, in Buddhist psychology, there's a massive difference between these two sets of states of mind. And it is crucial when we study the Buddhist model of the mind, we understand these really clearly, first intellectually, then we can apply it experientially. Because this is the basis of what we think and do and say, which is the basis of the law of karma. So it's fundamentally necessary to know how we define a negative and positive state of mind. And then we have to recognize them and start doing them, the unpacking and unraveling of our mind, so we can start to change it. So actions that are driven by a virtuous state of mind, like love and compassion and kindness, they're called virtuous, broadly speaking, okay? It's much more nuanced than that. And they will sow seeds in my mind that will program me to get one, a type of human rebirth, two, to be reborn with tendencies like that. I mean, if you play piano every day, you're not surprised you're good at piano. It's hardly rocket science. But if you practice love and kindness every day, don't be surprised you become a loving, kind person. It's very obvious, but we don't think this. Especially when you're angry and jealous and depressed, we kind of blame everybody else for it. It's not my fault, isn't it? I mean, if you're depressed every day, I'm not being rude. We should look at this. I'm not being rude. I'm not blaming. We're depressed every day. What kind of person are you turning yourself into? A depressed person. What else? But we think everyone else does it to me. We don't think, well, I can do anything about it. You know, this is like tragedy. We can mold our mind into any shape we like, Lama Zopa says. It's our job. So actions that are labeled negative are those that harm others and then eventually harm us. And actions that are labeled positive are actions that benefit us, but indeed are those that benefit others. And so we program our mind with those. So give a simple example of one action of virtue, a virtuous action of conscious, intentional, non-killing. So in order for any action you do to be a complete action, and we'll go into more detail in the weekend, and a complete action is one that has four things in place. And that action is a seed, drop a seed into your main bank vault. And I just use that analogy, obviously, that at the time of your death, one of those will be triggered, which will program you for your next rebirth. So in our case, we can deduce that a positive, complete action of non-killing was triggered that programmed us before we even stopped breathing in the past life, not more than a few weeks before we found our way to our present mother's fallopian tube, where it joined the egg and sperm. So in our case, so the first result of non-killing is get a human body, at least a human body. The second karmic result of non-killing would be you're born with a tendency to not kill. Well, look at the human planet. I'm sorry, it's so depressing, but most humans kill something. Even most religions say it's okay to kill. I mean, with respect to us. I was taught as a Catholic that God made animals for our benefit. They don't have a soul. He made them for us to eat and do what we want with. I'm not being rude. It's just a teaching. Not for the Buddha. Most humans kill. It's just the utter tragedy. So 3, the result of non-killing is the kind of karma is called experiences similar to the cause. The second one is tendencies similar to the cause, what your own mind is doing. The third one is how you're seen and treated by others in this world where we're so social, where we're bumping into sentient beings all the time, isn't it? So in your life, you could easily divide all the people you've known in this life, including the ants and the rats and the dogs, into 2 categories. Those that have been nice to you and those that have been mean to you. Think about it. It's so simple, it's embarrassing. Of course, they exchange roles, don't they? The hubby that cheated you on you and he left you for a younger version. One minute he's kind to you, next minute he's mean to you. That happens. But basically, we have people who are mean to us and people who are kind to us. This is the main cause of this. So sorry, non-killing, excuse me, the karmic result called experiences similar to the cause of non-killing would be that you won't get killed and you won't die young. The fourth karmic result of non-killing is called environmental result, even the way the physical world impacts upon us, is that you won't get sick. You'll be fat and healthy, and whatever you eat and drink will nourish you. So look at the world, look at the moment with COVID-19. I mean, there are two ways the karma of past killing is the main cause of this. Past killing, if people who have got the experience similar to the cause of past killing, they're the ones who get COVID-19 and die. That's the result of past killing. If you die, the COVID-19 sickness is environmental result. The dying young or being killed by somebody, that's the result of past killing. Now, look at the other result. Many of us don't get COVID-19. So, but we can't even touch, now maybe it's a bit better, we can't even touch each other because the physical world, the environment for us includes people in it, you know, the ants and the dogs and the rats and the humans and the food and the water and the air. Well, at the moment with COVID-19, other human beings are like our environment. We can't even touch each other. We'll die. This is all the collective karma of the whole world of past killing. Environmental result takes thousands of lives to ripen, you know. So killing, the four results of killing, for example, killing, a type of rebirth that is not human, like an animal birth or a hell birth or a spirit birth, some very intense suffering rebirths Buddha would talk about. The second result of killing is you're born, even in this life, with a tendency to kill. And look at animals. I mean, they're the best at killing. I mean, you know, that whale, that nice, lovely, big, fat whale, she opens her mouth for one mouthful of one breakfast in her long life, and 40 million little sentient beings go in. I mean, they're really good at killing. We humans aren't that. I mean, we're not too bad. We're, you know, pretty clever at it. But animals do far much killing, much more killing, you know. They spend their lives, the poor darlings, living in total paranoid fear of being killed. So all they do is kill in return. I mean, what a terrible life to have. So the tendency to keep killing is a result of past killing. The third result of killing is you die young or you get killed. Well, look at even just the human world. Look at all the babies that die young or get killed. We call it no medical reason. We can't see the reason. Karma is always for the Buddha the first cause of everything. So the babies who die, 3-year-olds who die, and 6-year-olds and 10-year-olds and teenagers and 30-year-old people die or get killed. Every one of them is the fruit of their past killing. Their petrol tank of morality of non-killing ran out. For the experience similar to the cause of killing. And the fourth result is the environmental result. Ill health, you get sick, you're very weak. You get diseases, you have allergies. I mean, look at the people who are sick on the planet. You know, look at the people who live in pain and suffering. This is the result of past killing. So the Buddha's view, this is reality. It's not just a thing he made up and wants to shove down your throat to believe in. This is his view of the universe. This is his scientific finding of how happiness and suffering function. So, of course, it's a big ask. We're used to the view of the materialist view, or you're used to the Christian teaching. You know, it's a big leap. Of course it is. It's quite different, you know. I mean, it's been around for 3,000 years, this view. Certainly around for 2,500 for the Buddhists. For the Tibetans who've been Buddhists for 1,200 years. The same way that the view of materialism is just in the bones of our being as a truth, for them, karma is just the truth. You know, they've learned it since they're born. It's their view of reality. Any more questions, people? Any more questions?
Robina, there are some questions that were put in the chat.
Good.
Just as you're finishing your last
okay.
part of your talk.
Good.
So the first one comes from Beth again, which is, how does the extinction of animals fit in?
Well, I mean, from the point of view, there are trillions of sentient beings in the universe, the Buddha would say. There are never any new ones and never any that disappear. I mean, this is so weird for us. It's a hard thing to get our head around, to think that whatever consciousness is existing at the moment, like an ant's consciousness or a human's, that it's literally beginningless. This is the most hilarious point for us. It's just even intellectually to grasp it. Why? Is because we have this deep instinctive belief that there has to be a first moment. That's why. It's just, for the Buddha, it's irrational. But this is how difficult it is. So there's never any new beings. We just keep going to different realms, you know. So, okay, given the reality of this world we live in, of humans and animals, including the little bugs and insects, then we talk about this world. Obviously, the materialist view doesn't talk about hell beings, and doesn't talk about spirits, and doesn't talk about God realms, and doesn't talk about Buddhas. It doesn't. So it just deals with see. So within that reality, we can see the planet is really suffering, and lots of, you know, creatures are dying out. Balance of the universe is a big mess. It's disharmonious. So it's a perfectly valid thing to talk about. But from the point of view of karma, it's no big deal. I'm not trying to say that. I'm not trying to be rude. It's nice to have kangaroos. It's sad to run out of kangaroos. We like our kangaroos, you know. Do you understand my point? So it's just showing the end of a particular kind of species. I mean, there have been many species on this planet that don't exist now. We know that. But from the point of view of sentient beings, if you run out of lizard bodies, if lizards stop, don't worry about it. Sentient beings will get another body. There's no problem. They'll get another body that suits their mind. So from the bigger picture point of view, it's not so vital. But from the point of view of all living on the human world to try and make it a better place, then it's important to have it nice and, you know, but it's, am I communicating, Beth? Does it make any sense what I'm saying, darling? Just a viewpoint I'm giving.
Oh yeah, it was just always interesting to think, like you said, there's different animals that have probably been alive way before we were.
That's right.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, and it's a hard thing to wrap your mind around, like all the animals that are going extinct.
No, it's sad because we see, because of the injustice and because of the greed of humans, but you know, that we're making a mess of the planet, and that's the part that's sad, isn't it? It's out of aggression and attachment. I mean, that's something about for the Tibetans, because they had this view of karma for like so long. Tibet was this untouched, in a way, like a paradise. I'm not trying to make it like Shangri-La, but because 99% of the Tibetans were Buddhist, so 99% of the Tibetans didn't kill creatures. So therefore, there was no such thing as an imbalance in the harmony of the environment. They didn't have such a thing as environmentalism. They naturally lived this way. And I mean, this is the tragedy since, you know, the Chinese communists have come in. They've completely ripped the country, ripped the guts out of the country, just taken all the minerals. There's starvation now. The animals are being slaughtered. I mean, His Holiness is in tears when he hears about this. Whereas before it was utterly balanced because they didn't kill anything, you know, everything lived in harmony. So of course it'd be marvelous if it were like that, but we've got to track back what is the cause of this. It's because of our human greed and our just lack of understanding of the interdependence of all the things, isn't it, Beth?
Yeah. Is there any like certain, I want to say certain prayers or things that you can direct towards animals in that situation?
Lots of the practice. I mean, of course, many practices we can do to help the world environmentally and others. Of course, there are lots and lots. I mean, Lama Zopa is kind of renowned for the kind of practices and mantras and special things that, for anything, for any kind of thing, they're really into all of that. There's plenty. I mean, you know, anything. I mean, medicine Buddha is a practice that the Tibetans love to do. Medicine Buddha. If you just you know, Google YouTube Lama Zopa medicine Buddha mantra, you'll get a thing of him chanting the mantra. It's a lovely sound. You can learn that mantra. You can sing it wherever you go and bless the air. And every time because the Buddhist view is when you say these mantras, it blesses whoever hears it, you know, so you can go around saying mantras and bless all the creatures in the world. You can do all that and think of all those who are suffering and send them, you know, you certainly can do that kind of thing. Absolutely, Beth. There's lots of things you can do.
There's another question that came from, hold on a minute, came from Ida. It says, how is a consciousness born in other realms? Do hell beings procreate? Do gods procreate? Do hungry ghosts procreate?
I understand. Let's talk about that. Okay, I'm not deeply educated about this, but let's just have a brief look at, first of all, the Vajrayana explanation of the makeup of the universe is really quite practical and quite helpful in relation to this. So the physical, as His Holiness talks about, you know, in the Vajrayana model, we've got There are minds, trillions and trillions and trillions of mind streams. And then we have matter. And this is how we used to talk back in the medieval days in our culture. Matter is made of the 4 elements. That's it. And that's still the model they use. It's still deeply described. And it's the basis of, let's say, the Tibetan medical system. Now, the interesting point is this. All minds are inextricably linked to their own set of the 4 elements. So this is the point. In the Kala Chakra Tantra, Lama Zopa says, one of these many tantric texts, he says there are these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship, and I'm getting eventually to your answer, by the way. I'm giving some background. There's this, it describes in the Kala Chakra Tantra, as Rinpoche says, these detailed descriptions of the intimate relationship between internal and external energy. Well, internal is mind, and then external is the physical, including our own physical body. Well, this is the grosser level, isn't it? The gross level of the intimate of the physical, of the elements, is this gross body, this bag of bones, intimately linked to our sensory consciousness. They're inseparable. You can't have an eye consciousness without an eyeball, you know? So that's the grosser level of consciousness. Then we've got the subtle level. So it's at the subtle level where Lama Zopa is describing. So even, you know, so you've got the 72,000 subtle channels. This is the Ayurvedic system. It's similar to the Chinese. This is the Tibetan medical system. This is the Vajrayana system. We've got this subtle nervous system, the 72,000 subtle channels that course through our body. And then wind energies, all the different pranas. I mean, the Tibetans spent about 14 years studying all this. This is the basis of good health, you know, the different wind energies. So all these different wind energies are coursing through these 72,000 channels, inextricably linked to our states of mind, your love, your attachment, your anger. They've all got their own wind energies. And so as Lama Zopa says, even when you just got angry thoughts, that, okay, is programming your mind with anger karmically. And just, you know, and also though it's impacting upon the wind energies connected to your anger, which is it eventually produces your physical body. So the wind energies at the subtle level, then we program them with anger. Let's say you program your wind energy with killing and anger and lying, and your mind as well. Then when you die, your mind is completely programmed with killing. The karmic seed that is triggered is the karma to be born as a lion. So then your mind, along with those wind energies, and then, you know, once you leave that body, and the new mummy lion and daddy lion have sex, you run like a magnet. You programmed your mind and your wind energies to join the lion egg and sperm, where you now get mixing your mind and wind energies with that physical body, which you created the cause to go to. So that's the way you get another rebirth. So if you're born a human, then, as you know, you could be an animal and you didn't do anything to just get a human body, but you got a human seed in your mind. And at the time of your death, as a dog, your little Buddhist mummy saying mantras in your ear, which triggers one of your human seeds. So then that one of your human karmic seeds is triggered at the time of your death. And then you leave a dog's body and then you go to a human mummy's body. So that's due to the karma you create and how you program your mind and your physical energies to the type of body you get. So gods know they don't have sex, and spirits don't have sex, and hell beings don't have. They don't procreate. No, humans and animals procreate, and some of them even just have spontaneous rebirth. So they have spontaneous rebirth. That's how they talk about it. Hope that answers the question.
Yes, it does. Thank you, Venerable.
Good. Very good. Thank you. Mary Jo's got a question there.
Right. Yeah.
David.
Yeah, I'm trying to unmute her, but there you go, Mary Jo.
Okay, Mary Jo, talk to me, darling.
Hi. So you mentioned a little anger, you know, is so powerful. So do you think, I mean, I don't have a lot of anger that I'm aware of much of the time. I live pretty remotely, but is it just better to kind of like remove yourself and don't be interacting with people when you're having a lot of anger for whatever reason?
It makes a lot of sense. What you're saying is if we can be conscious enough, if we're angry, if things that we see out there and people and behavior, even if we read the news and read our iPad, if it triggers our anger and we can't control it, then for our own benefit, we should remove ourselves from it if we can't control it. For our own sake, Mary Jo, there's no question. That would be a very sensible thing to do. But the tragedy is anger loves a fight. When you're angry, you can't wait to find something to be angry with. If you have enough awareness and enough, you know, then you will remove yourself or you'll try and control it. But once we're into anger, anger loves a fight. Anger wants to find something. Anger can't wait to find something to argue with. So it's quite dangerous, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm really unclear, but it seems like insects are sentient beings. Is that right?
Absolutely. They've got a mind. And then due to their karma, they're born into a little body with little legs and a little head and, you know, whatever they've got. Absolutely. Absolutely. They're sentient beings. Yes. They've been humans before. They've been dogs before. Yes, absolutely. From the Buddhist point of view, yes.
Oh, they have been humans before.
Oh gosh, all the animals have been humans in the past. We've been animals before. So that's why if we've got a human body, we should, you know, be happy, not waste it.
Yeah. And you said something, but I didn't catch it all, that it takes thousands of lives to
the environmental karma the environmental karmic result. I didn't finish what Lama Zopa said. It's very interesting. He said the intimate relationship between, just two things I'm saying here. The intimate relationship between internal and external energy. So then the mind is angry, that programs your mind with anger, which produces future tendency to be angry, but it also pollutes your wind energies, which in turn produces your kind of body, which is a cause of sickness. Sickness is the result of negative states of mind and negative actions. And then longer term than that, eventually it impacts upon the external elements and you get born in an environment where there are earthquakes or, you know, you have an aeroplane crash or something. Even so, all things that happen to us is the physical elements which are related to the actions of minds. There's nothing anywhere in the universe that can't be tracked back to the actions of minds. We are literally the creator of the entire universe.
Wow.
And so environmental karma, like when you have collective karma of environmental, like COVID-19, that's probably from thousands of lifetimes ago. That takes a long time to ripen. Yeah.
It may take a long time to ripen, but it doesn't always, or does it always?
I think environmental karma, from what I've understood, that takes a long time to manifest. Yeah. That's what I understand. I'm not sure. Not quite sure. I can't be too definitive about that.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
All
and
right.
One time you mentioned about lower karma, I think. Is that like a negative, is that the type of negative karma?
The type of rebirth they call lower rebirths, lower and upper rebirths. And the bottom line, the defining characteristic of a decent rebirth or one that isn't so good, in other words, a happy rebirth, the defining characteristic between the happy rebirths and the suffering rebirths is that you're born, the happy ones. No. The defining characteristics between the upper and lower realms, as they describe them in Buddhism, and there are levels of them, is whether they're happy or not. So happiness is a state of mind. So if you've got lots of virtuous karma from being kind and loving and generous, then you will experience, first of all, the tendency. One of them could be the tendency to keep doing those actions. But the other one is called the experience similar to the cause, where you're treated nicely by people. The banks give you credit. You have a lovely mummy. There's food in your belly. You're treated well. The environment is good to you. That's what happiness means. It's the fruit of your past virtue. So anything that's we call suffering, poverty, sickness, no one liking us, people being mean to us, the bank not giving us credit, this is the result of actions. Like, for example, if no one believes your words, it's because you've lied in the past. If people don't give you credit, it's because you've stolen in the past. If you get sick all the time, it's because you've killed in the past. This is not blame. It's just Buddha's analysis of the causes. So if we look at our experiences, every second, and look at all the happy ones, we'd be blissed out. We created these. They're not just good luck. Every second you have a decent meal and it nourishes your body, that's the fruit of some non-killing karma of yours. Every time a person speaks the truth to you, it's because of your past non-lying. Every time the weather's lovely, it's because of your past non-harming. Every millisecond what we experience out there, as our Lama Zopa says, is our own karmic appearance. We are the creators of the universe every second. I mean, it's a bit of cosmic concept, but this is the Buddha's view. It's not good luck and bad luck. It's not blame. It's not punishment. It's not reward. There's nobody running the show. Yeah. Okay. Good, darling. What else?
Okay, Robina.
Yes.
Questions come up from someone called Steve.
Yeah.
How do you explain the early deaths of Lama Yeshe and Yogananda?
It's a good point. Okay. So it's a whole different story when it comes to highly realized beings. So let's assume they are who they appeared to be, which was highly realized spiritual beings. They're in charge of what's going on. They can choose when they die, when they live. They can do what they like. So if, certainly the way we learn about the role of the teacher, the guru, this highly realized being, everything they do is a teaching for us. So that's how they talk about the Buddha. They talk about the 12 deeds of the Buddha, the whole life story of the Buddha, because the Buddha, the Mahayana explanation of the Buddha is he was already a Buddha. He didn't need to be reborn, but he chose to be reborn to show us. So his life was a teaching. So the same we would say with Lama Yeshe. I mean, Lama Yeshe is my Lama. And so then my view of Lama Yeshe would be that due to not his karma, if he's a holy being, he doesn't have negative karma. So they, so then they take on whatever they do out of a teaching for sentient beings. Or it's even due to our karmic appearance that our guru might die young. We don't have the karma to have the guru. It could be like that. If they are holy beings, it can't be from negative karma that they're experiencing suffering. If they're Buddhas, certainly they can't be. Like Dalai Lama is said to be a Buddha. There he is, born a Tibetan, going through the Tibetan experience, looking like he's suffering, having to escape all the drama. But if he is a Buddha, it is an impossibility that it's due to any negative karma, and it's impossible that he's suffering. He's got his compassion, he's got love, but it's not suffering because there's no delusions there. So that's the way you would describe that. Of course, we don't know who's a holy being and who isn't, of course. But that would be the explanation. That's out of their own, they choose to do this, it's a teaching for their disciples.
Okay, you have a question from Brian.
Yes,
so
Brian.
Unmute.
Happy to see you again.
Hello, Venerable.
Yes.
So if karma is not random,
yes,
how would that apply to the group of us meeting this evening? I mean,
yeah, nothing can be random. I mean, put it this way, if we were a bunch of flowers in a garden, and we are in a garden together, we've just popped up today, the seeds there that have been planted in the past that caused these fruits to ripen today in this particular configuration. I know it sounds kind of like weird and sort of like, because we're so used to thinking that things are random. But it can't be random. It's not a possibility it's random. When we're finally enlightened, Brian, they say when you've got a mind that sees everything as that exists without mistake, it's only then that you can see the intricacies of exactly what actions each of us did when that resulted in this, which brought this, which came from that, which because of this and because of that. In other words, it's even like a person who's a botanist. If they're really genius, the more knowledge they have, the more precise they can be about exactly what is where. So that's exactly what it is with karma too.
Thank you.
As
Yes.
a principle, yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
So in other words, in general, then you could say, if you meet a person who pickpockets you tomorrow, that's not just some random event. A person who gives you $20 when you can't find your wallet, that's not a random event. In that same sense, whatever you see day by day is not it's the fruit of your past actions. And that's why the great bodhisattvas, they rather have bad things happen than good. They say, because every millisecond of anything good happening, every day you wake up, Brian, and your house is still there, and your partner's still there, and the food is in the fridge, and you go down the shops and there's money in the bank, every second, which we think of as some kind of just, this is the way it is, I worked so hard for American Airlines. No, it's the fruit of your past virtue. You're using up your seeds in your bank vault. So the bodhisattvas get very nervous when all the good keeps happening because they're using up all their, but then when the bad things happen, they kind of get happy. And I remember one time, I always tell this story, when I was in Miami years ago, and it was this conference, and the topic was, why do bad things happen to good people? And it was a Jew, a rabbi, me, a Catholic, and a Lutheran. It sounds like a joke. I've talked like this before. But actually, it was an easy talk for me. I mean, I talked about karma, and the rabbi clapped. He was a Kabbalah rabbi, and he said, we have a similar view. They have a view of karma. And he said, we have a saying, every time something bad happens, you think, great, one less debt to repay. So there's a way of using karma to interpret our lives, Brian, that makes us very grateful for the good things, not to the universe, but to ourselves, because we sowed those seeds. In other words, your life is like your garden. Whatever's in it, honey, you put it there. It's a really good view, I'd say. It's a really delicious one. We tend to think of it as good luck out there or bad luck. But no, whatever's in your garden, you put them there. So you own the good things and you own the bad things. And you try to fix the bad things and you try to grow more of the good. That's the attitude, Brian. Do you understand?
So Matthew has this question.
Yeah.
Can you say a little?
What happened to Brian? He disappeared. Did he hear me? Brian's went off the screen. What happened?
No, he's still there. He looks okay.
Oh, okay, fine. All right. Go on then.
So Matthew asks, can you say a little about staying grounded when your mood subtly changes moment to moment?
Oh, darling, I know. I mean, this is the reason is that because we're not becoming, is because we're not conscious. I mean, this is the reason we're not grounded. The reason is because you see, mood is a really interesting word. Mood is what you feel when your body is involved. And that's our tragedy, that we don't notice what's going on in our mind until it affects the body. In other words, that's just the tip of the iceberg. And that's when we say we've got a mood. Well, it's a bit late to notice your mood. Well, that's why we've got to notice what goes on in the mind that informs the mood. Can you hear my point? Whoever asked that question. So this is why the long-term job is to develop a practice every day and develop the skill to step out of our heads slowly, and begin to observe our crazy thoughts. And we bring that skill to bear in our daily life. And we get better and better and better at observing the thoughts at a much subtler level before they get to the level of affecting our body and getting a mood. A mood is like, you know, a mood is just when the body is involved. And that's the tip of the tip of the tip of the iceberg. So the skill, the key to success, which what it gives us is the ability to see our mind before it gets to the level of the body. And that's the level at which we can change it, because that's the level at which it is conceptual. All of these things, that mood, angry, shaking, anxiety, anxious feelings, angry feelings, they're just the body involved, and it's way too late to do some work. We can do what we can, but it's like, and I use the analogy of, you don't notice the wheels wobbling. You only notice when they're falling off. Well, it's a bit late. That's the reason why. So that we can't just wait for the mood to come. We've got to just start watching our mind before that. And that's what takes time. I hope that made sense.
So now you also have a question, let's see, from Ida. How does one explain the karma of a child that dies by suicide?
I know, it's very tragic, isn't it? I mean, we come into this life fully programmed. Hitler came into this life from the first second of conception, programmed with his tendencies. So a little child, the same. We're all children at some point. These tendencies did not come out of the blue. It means it's tragic that even in a child that the thought would arise to kill themselves. Maybe, you know, this is the point. There's two things. There's what's in our mind, and then there's what we meet out there that triggers what's in our mind. So if some child might have a tendency to kill themselves, but if they're born in a loving family with kindness and good teachings, and they hear things, and at some point the thought might arise, but they've got the means to counteract it. But if they haven't, and they're born into a situation and it's miserable and horrible, that will just feed this little tendency in their mind from a past life to want to kill themselves, even when they're 5. You know, it's so tragic. That's the way karma ripens, you know, the way karma works. There's the mind, and then there's the conditions out there that trigger what's in the mind, you know. Maybe the person keeps reading, the little child keeps hearing about other people killing themselves, and that triggers, it doesn't tell them they should kill themselves. They've got to have that tendency in their mind first. But if they don't hear about it, it's like the tendency to play music. If you never meet a piano, it won't arise in your mind to play music. It's when you meet the external condition that it triggers what's in your mind. So whether you're 5 or 95, it's the same, you know. It's just tragic as children would do it, isn't it? Young people these days, it's so sad, you know. What else is there, David?
Those are all the questions that are in the chat box.
All right, good, okay.
I think Kimberly has a question.
Good, okay, go. Go, yes, Kimberly.
Okay. I really enjoyed your talk so much, Venerable.
Good.
I listen over and over again. I learn something new every single time. So I wanted to ask, like the technical aspects of karma and causes and conditions, or external conditions. So with the child with the tendency to kill itself, him or herself, or themselves,
oh yes,
but they have a, you know, a loving and wonderful environment, so that karma isn't triggered. are you saying that the things that we encounter in our environment, in our lives, trigger the actual seeds of karma?
Of course, a seed needs a condition, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, seeds can be very strong. Like, for example, I use the example, like I can think of any tendency you've got. Any tendency, it might not arise until you meet the condition. A condition is like the water and the soil, or the water that nourishes the seed. So, you've got a tendency to be loving, or you've got a tendency to be forgiving. If no one ever harms you, you won't need to forgive. But if you get harmed, your little tendency to be forgiving might pop up. Of course, karma does. Seeds need conditions, just like any seed does. It's a good analogy, of course.
And
so
then
what?
I don't want to take up too much, but does that mean we're reacting? So we're reacting to our own thoughts and our own stories in our minds, and they're enhanced and triggered by an external environment.
Everything we meet out there, every person we meet out there, every condition, every sound, every smell, every taste, everything out there triggers what's in our mind. Of course it does.
It's almost like there's a marriage of entities. They're not that separate.
Don't use the word entities.
Oh, it's so weird. But okay, so if we looked at karma as a seed,
sweetheart, the law of karma is an example of the fundamental law called dependent arising.
Yeah.
Everything exists first in relation to many, many causes and conditions coming together. And then more subtly, you've got different levels of dependent arising. There's not just one thing that's in isolation. There can't be such a thing. Everything is interdependent. So there's first the seed in the mind. When we learn about karma, we have to learn about the seed in our mind, because we're so used to thinking it's only the condition that makes it happen. We're thinking a child will kill themselves because their mother trained them to kill themselves. We think I played music because my mother gave me music. I'm stressing the emphasis on how we come with our own tendencies, and then our external life triggers those. I mean, for example, in my life was so classic. I was one of 7 children, and I was a bully. I was angry, and I was nice as well in other ways, apparently, but I was a bully. And so I was mean to my sisters because I felt always we didn't have enough money. We didn't have enough beds. We had to share beds, so I was always lashing out at people. So I was a really naughty girl. Now, I got so naughty at some point, my mother, because I was walking up and down the main street in her high heels at the age of 13 and stolen earrings from Woolworths, trying to seduce the greengrocer's son. So she freaked out and sent me to boarding school, which is the same school I went to every day, the Catholic convent. But suddenly the condition completely changed. So that ripened my tendency to be holy, to go to mass every day, to be good, to study, to be ethical. I turned into a saint overnight. Those conditions triggered different tendencies in me. It's really obvious, If you're an alcoholic, and if you keep away from alcohol, your alcoholism will go away gradually. But if you feed your tendency to like alcohol with alcohol, it's sort of obvious. It's obvious. Causes and conditions, honey. You see my point?
Yeah, I just get lost a little bit in my imagination, and then
This is technicalities. Don't get caught away in imagination. That doesn't help here.
I just see like DNA, kind of like little genes.
We're not discussing stop all that. This is a load of rubbish. Be quiet, Kim.
Okay.
Excuse me. I'm not being rude. I am being rude, but that's got nothing to do with what I'm discussing.
All right.
Don't even use the word entity. DNAs. You're making them like you're humanizing them all. That's absurd. It's just simply keep it on the earth. Well, do what you like, Kim, whatever works for your mind. But darling, don't make it like it's romantic. It's too cosmic and romantic. We're trying to talk about something technical.
Yeah, I hear you. Causes or dependent arising is a good grounding.
That's what it is, darling.
Yeah.
Karma is an excellent first example of the natural law of dependent arising. That's the law that runs everything. And karma is an example of dependent arising.
It's so hard to see, like physically I can see it, but it's like the mind harder, much harder.
One step at a time, darling.
Thank you.
Okay, sweetheart. It's time to go. Look at that. Time to go, babies. Okay, that's it. I hope there was something useful. I got some help out of this. It was very helpful for me. I clarified my own thoughts by having to talk. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Robina.
Okay.
Thank you,
Vulnerable,
Venerable.
vulnerable Robina.
Okay, yes.
So
Thank
for the rest of the class, please note that there's some information in the chat box, and in particular, there are notes on the materials for the workshop.
Oh, yeah, I
this
provided
weekend.
course notes for this weekend, which goes into details about what I'm talking about and the things we'll talk about the weekend. They're all there as PDF, either as a formatted for your phone or formatted for your tablet. All right.
All right.
I'll see some of you tomorrow, all being well. Okay, darlings. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much.